Not just in school. In everything. While other kids picked up math quickly, I struggled. While my classmates breezed through reading assignments, I labored over every page, while everyone else seemed to just get it. I felt like I was perpetually behind. And you know what everyone told me? You're just not as smart as the other kids. Some people are gifted. You're not one of them. Accept it. So I did. For years, I accepted that I was slow, that I'd always be playing catch up, that I'd never be one of the smart ones. Pause, shift energies. And then I discovered something that changed everything. Something that transformed me from the slowest person in the room to someone who could outthink almost anyone. Not a study hack. Not a memory trick. Not some magic pill. A method. Richard Feynman's method in direct address edition. And here's what shocked me: Feynman was slow too. At least, that's what people thought. While other physicists rattled off equations from memory, Feynman would sit there, working things out from scratch. While others moved quickly through problems, Feynman took his time, thinking deeply. People thought he was behind. They thought he was the slow one. They were wrong. He wasn't slow. He was thorough. And that thoroughness, that refusal to rush, that commitment to deep understanding, that's what made him unstoppable. Today, I'm going to show you Feynman's method, the exact process he used to go from being seen as slow to becoming one of the greatest minds in history. The same method I used to go from struggling student to someone who can learn anything. And here's what I promise you: by the end of this talk, you'll understand why being slow, really, truly understanding instead of quickly memorizing, is actually the fastest path to becoming unstoppable. Let's start with a story that reveals everything. Aesher tell this with building energy. It's the 1940s. Feynman is at Princeton working on his PhD. And there's this tradition among the physics grad students. They challenge each other with difficult problems. It's like intellectual combat. Who can solve problems the fastest? And all the students prepare for this. They memorize formulas. They study problem sets. They learn the standard tricks and techniques. They're optimizing for speed. Feynman doesn't do this. When someone throws a problem at him, he doesn't reach into his memory for a formula. He sits there. He thinks. He derives what he needs from basic principles. Right there. In real time. Pauses who, and everyone watches him, thinking, poor Feynman. He's so slow, he doesn't even have the formulas memorized. He's never going to keep up. But here's what happens: Feynman often solves the problems faster than the people who memorized everything. And when he's done, he can explain not just the answer, but why the answer works. He can modify the approach for variations. He can see connections to other problems. The memorizers get the answer. Feynman gets understanding. Hacka make the point, they looked fast. He was unstoppable. And that's the difference. That's what Feynman's method does. It makes you look slow at first, because you're doing deep work while everyone else is doing shallow work. But over time, the depth compounds. And eventually, you're not just keeping up, you're leading. You're unstoppable. Walk across stages. So what is this method? What did Feynman actually do that made him go from seeming slow to being unstoppable? Let me break it down for you, because this isn't mystical. This isn't talent. This is a specific, repeatable process that anyone can use. The method has 4 parts, 4 principles that Feynman lived by, and each one, by itself, is powerful, but together, they create something extraordinary. Let me show you the first part, and this one is going to feel uncomfortable. Effect Directive Part 1: Never pretend you understand something when you don't. Sounds simple, right? But almost nobody does this. We all pretend. All the time, you're in a meeting. Someone explains something you didn't quite follow, but everyone else is nodding. So you nod too. You pretend you got it. You're reading a textbook. There's a concept you don't fully grasp, but the book moves on, so you move on. You pretend you understood. You're in a conversation. Someone uses a term you don't know, but you don't want to look stupid by asking, so you pretend you know what they're talking about. So I point to this pretending, this faking it. This is what keeps you slow, because every time you pretend to understand something, you build on a weak foundation, and eventually that foundation crumbles. Feynman refused to pretend, ever, and it made him look slow, but it made him unstoppable. Tell this story. There's this famous moment at Princeton. Feynman is in a seminar. A renowned physicist is presenting. Complex stuff. Everyone's impressed. Everyone's nodding along. And Feynman raises his hand. I don't understand what you just said. The room goes silent, because everyone else is pretending they understand. These are the smartest physics students in the world, and they're all faking it. But Feynman isn't. He's admitting confusion. And you know what happens? 3 other students admit they didn't understand either. Then 5 more. Then suddenly everyone's asking questions. And it turns out the presenter hadn't explained it clearly at all. Ash pauses. The difference. Everyone else was moving fast, building on shaky understanding. Feynman was moving slow, building on solid ground. 6 months later, when they're working on advanced problems, the students who pretended to understand are struggling. They're going back, trying to relearn basics they never really learned. Feynman, he's moving forward, building on his solid foundation. Unstoppable. Warisha make it actionable. So the first part of the method, stop pretending. When you don't understand something, admit it. To yourself, to others. And don't move on until you do understand. This will make you feel slow. People will move ahead while you're stuck on basics. But you're not actually slow. You're building the foundation that will make you unstoppable later. Now let me show you the second part of the method. And this one is the core of everything. Get intense. Part 2, explain everything in the simplest possible terms. This is the famous Feynman technique. And it's not just a nice idea. It's a diagnostic tool. A way to reveal what you actually understand versus what you just think you understand. Let me show you how powerful this is. A circ share this examples and student comes to Feynman and says, I understand quantum mechanics. Feynman says, great. Explain it to me like I'm 12 years old. The student starts, well, in quantum mechanics, we have wave functions that collapse upon observation, and the superposition of states means. Feynman stops him. I'm 12. I don't know those words. Try again. The student struggles. He can't do it. He can use the jargon, but he can't make it simple. Well, I'm pausing. Feynman says, then you don't really understand quantum mechanics. You know the words. You know the equations. But you don't understand what's actually happening. Assange make the point that this is brutal, but it's true, and it's liberating. Because once you accept this standard, once you demand that you can explain things simply, you stop fooling yourself about what you understand, and that's when real learning begins. Give a concrete example. Let's try it right now. Pick something you think you understand from your work or your field. Got it. Now explain it to me like I'm 12. Simple words, clear examples, no jargon. Can you do it? Really do it without falling back on technical terms or complex explanations. Pause. If you're struggling, you've just discovered what Feynman's method reveals. You don't understand it as well as you thought. And that's perfect. Because now you know exactly what you need to work on. Share the process. Here's what Feynman would do when he couldn't explain something simply. He'd go back. He'd break it down. He'd think about it from different angles. He'd find analogies. He'd simplify further and further until he hit bedrock. Concepts so basic they couldn't be simplified further. And then he'd build back up, using only simple language, clear logic, concrete examples. Hey, slow down, this takes time, this looks slow. While other people are racing ahead, using complex terminology, sounding smart, you're stuck at the basics, making things simple. But here's what happens. When you finally do understand something well enough to explain it simply, you understand it at a level those fast, moving people never reach. They have surface knowledge, you have deep understanding, they can pass tests, you can solve novel problems. They're fast now, but stuck later. You're slow now, but unstoppable later. Tell this story. Feynman once spent 3 days trying to explain a physics concept to undergraduate students. 3 days. Most professors would spend 30 minutes, use some equations, call it done. But Feynman wasn't satisfied. The explanation wasn't simple enough. The students were nodding, but he could tell they didn't really get it. So he kept working, breaking it down further, finding better analogies, simplifying more. And when he finally nailed it, when he could explain it so clearly that every student genuinely understood, something amazing happened. He understood the concept better too, deeper than before, because in forcing himself to make it simple, he'd had to truly understand every nuance, every implication, every connection. The slow process of simplification had made him more knowledgeable about a topic he already knew. That's the power of part 2. Simple explanation isn't just a teaching tool. It's a learning tool. It's how you go from knowing something to mastering it. Now let's talk about the third part of the method. This one transformed how I think about learning entirely. Us share this part 3. Build everything from first principles. This is what separates people who memorize from people who understand. People who are fast from people who are unstoppable. Let me explain what first principles thinking actually means. Get clear. Most people learn by analogy. They see how something works in one situation and apply it to another. They follow patterns. They use templates. They think, this problem looks like that problem, so I'll use that solution. And this works, most of the time, for routine situations. But when you encounter something new, something that doesn't fit the pattern, you're stuck. You don't know what to do, because you never really understood the underlying principles. Contrast this, Feynman learned by first principles. He'd break everything down to the most basic truths, facts that are self-evidently true or have been proven, and then build up from there. When he encountered a new problem, he didn't ask, what does this look like? He asked, what's actually happening here? What are the fundamental principles at play? Give an example. Someone asks him about how a radio works. Most people would say, it receives radio waves and converts them to sound. Technical answer. Sounds smart, but it's pattern matching. It's not deep understanding. Feynman breaks it down to first principles. Electricity moving through a wire creates a magnetic field. A changing magnetic field creates electricity in a nearby wire. So if you make electricity change in a pattern, say, the pattern of your voice, you create changing magnetic fields. Those fields create electricity with the same pattern in a wire far away. Then you convert that electricity pattern to sound. That's radio. Pause. Same explanation, but one is pattern matching, the other is understanding. One lets you repeat what you've heard. The other lets you figure out things you've never heard. Make it practically. This is why Feynman could solve problems nobody else could solve. Not because he was smarter, but because when he encountered something new, he could break it down to first principles and build up a solution. The people who learned by patterns, they were stuck. The new problem didn't match their patterns. Feynman wasn't stuck. He built the solution from scratch, from basic principles he deeply understood. Let's share the cost piece. But here's what this cost him time. It took longer. It looked slower. While other physicists pulled equations from memory and got quick answers, Feynman sat there, thinking from first principles, deriving everything. People thought he was behind. They thought he was slow, until problems got hard, until patterns stopped working, until memorization wasn't enough. Then suddenly, Feynman was the only one moving forward. While everyone else was stuck, he was solving. Unstoppable. Direct application. So part 3. Always ask, what are the first principles here? Don't just learn patterns. Understand the fundamentals. Build from the ground up. This makes you slow at first, but it makes you unstoppable when it matters. Now the fourth part. This is the piece most people miss. The piece that ties everything together. Get passionately. Part 4. Test your understanding constantly. Never assume you've got it. This is where most people fail. They learn something once. They think they understand, they move on. And they never test themselves. Feynman never stopped testing. Never stopped questioning his own understanding. Never assumed he'd gotten to the bottom of something. Tell this story. There's this incredible moment late in Feynman's career. He's in his 60s. Nobel Prize winner, world-famous physicist. He's lecturing on quantum electrodynamics, his own work, the work that won him the prize. And in the middle of the lecture, he stops, he thinks, and he says, wet. I'm not sure I'm explaining this right. Let me think about this again. Let that land as his own work, decades of experience. And he's still questioning himself, still testing his understanding, still willing to admit uncertainty. I contrast this, compare that to most people. Most people learn something once, and then they spend the rest of their lives repeating that initial understanding, never questioning it, never testing it, never deepening it. They learned it fast, but they never grew beyond that initial learning. They're stuck at their initial level forever. Make the point. Feynman kept testing, kept questioning, kept deepening. His understanding compounded over time. He didn't just know more. He understood deeper. That's what made him unstoppable. Not that he learned fast, but that he never stopped learning. Fast. Give the technique. Here's how he tested himself. He'd try to explain the same concept in multiple ways, to different audiences, using different analogies from different angles, and each time he'd discover something new, some nuance he'd missed, some connection he hadn't seen, some implication he hadn't considered. Testing revealed gaps. Gaps led to learning. Learning led to deeper understanding. Deeper understanding led to being unstoppable. Sec pause. Bring it together. So those are the 4 parts of Feynman's Method 1. Never pretend you understand. Admit confusion. Build on solid foundations. 2. Explain everything simply. Use it as a diagnostic. Expose what you don't really know. 3. Think from first principles. Don't pattern match. Understand fundamentally. 4. Test constantly. Never assume you're done learning. Keep deepening. Hey, get real, Fike. Now I know what you're thinking. This sounds great, but it's so slow. How am I supposed to compete with people who just memorize everything and move fast? And that's the exact question I asked when I first learned about this method. It felt counterintuitive. It felt like I'd fall further behind, not catch up. Let me tell you what actually happens. A. For share the transformation. When I started using Feynman's method, I felt slow. Everyone else was finishing chapters while I was still on page 1, making sure I truly understood. Everyone else was moving to advanced topics while I was still solidifying basics. I felt like I was falling behind, like the method was making me slower, not faster. Build this, but then something shifted. Around month 3 of using this method consistently, I started solving problems faster than the people who'd memorized everything. Not because I was quicker, but because I understood deeply. I didn't have to think about which formula to use. I just saw what was happening and knew what to do. I started making connections nobody else made, between different topics, between different fields, because I understood principles, not just patterns. And principles transfer. I started handling new situations easily, things I'd never seen before, because I could build solutions from first principles. I wasn't dependent on having seen something similar before. And by month 6, I wasn't just keeping up, I was ahead, way ahead, of people who'd been faster than me the entire time. They'd hit a wall. Their memorized patterns weren't working on harder problems. They were stuck. I was accelerating. Every problem I solved deepened my understanding. Every concept I mastered gave me tools for the next one. I was compounding. Make the point clear. They were fast. I became unstoppable. Share this analogy. Think of it like building a house. The fast way is to skip the foundation. Just start putting up walls. It looks impressive quickly. You're making visible progress. The slow way is to spend time on the foundation, dig deep. Pour concrete, let it cure. It looks like nothing's happening for a long time. But which house stands? Which house can you build higher? Which house is still standing in 10 years? 8 point of Feynman's method is the foundation. It looks slow. It feels slow. But it creates something that can't be shaken, something that keeps growing, something unstoppable. All right, and get personal. Let me tell you about the moment I really understood this. The moment the method clicked for me completely. I was working on a project at work. Complex problem. Everyone on the team was stuck. We'd tried everything. All the standard approaches. All the patterns we knew. Nothing worked. And I'm sitting there thinking, and I realize we're all trying to pattern match. We're all trying to find something we've seen before and apply it. But this is new. The patterns don't fit. If I continue the story, so I do what Feynman would do. I go back to first principles. What are we actually trying to accomplish? What are the fundamental constraints? What are the basic principles at play? And I build up from there. Not using patterns. Building fresh from fundamentals. It takes me 2 days. 2 days of thinking, of breaking things down, of building back up. While everyone else is trying quick solutions that don't work. 2 days of looking slow. The build to the payoff, and then I have it. A solution nobody had thought of. Because it didn't match any pattern we knew, but it worked from first principles. I present it to the team and it works. Perfectly. Problem solved, and my boss says, "How did you figure that out?" We were all stuck, and I say, I went slow. I built from first principles. I didn't try to be fast. I tried to be thorough. Positively, that's when I realized being slow, really slow, deeply slow, thoroughly slow, that's the fastest path to being unstoppable. Say shift tone, get practical, hen. So how do you actually implement this? How do you start using Feynman's method today? Let me give you the exact process I use, the daily practice that transformed me from slow to unstoppable. Present this clearly every day. I pick one thing I want to understand, one concept, one idea, one principle, just one, not a whole chapter, not a whole course, one thing. And then I work through the 4 parts of the method first. I admit what I don't understand about it. I write down my questions, my confusion, the parts that aren't clear. I don't pretend. I'm honest about my gaps. Continue the process. Second, I try to explain it simply. I get a blank piece of paper, and I write how I would explain this to a 12-year-old, and I write it out, and I notice where I get stuck, where I can't explain clearly. Those stuck points are my gaps. Third, I break it down to first principles. What are the fundamental truths here? What's actually happening? Not what pattern does this match? What principles is this built on? Fourth, I test myself. I try to explain it a different way. I try to apply it to a new situation. I try to see what happens if I change one variable. I push my understanding. I look for edges where it breaks down. Make it doable. That's it. One concept, 4 parts. Takes me about an hour. Sometimes less if it's simple. Sometimes more if it's complex. But every day, I'm building one concept at a time, one deep understanding at a time, and it compounds. After a month, I've deeply understood 30 concepts. After 6 months, 180. After a year, 365. Paint the picture here. Compare that to someone who skims 5 concepts a day. Surface understanding, no depth. By the end of the year, they've encountered thousands of concepts. But they don't really understand any of them. They're fast but shallow. They've covered ground without building foundation. I've covered less ground, but every step is solid. Every concept is deeply understood. I can build on it. I can apply it. I can connect it to other concepts. The point, who's more capable at the end of that year? The person who encountered thousands of concepts superficially, or the person who mastered hundreds deeply? Who's fast? Who's unstoppable? Tell a final story. Let me end with one last story about Feynman. This one gets to the heart of why the method works. It's 1986. Feynman is dying. Cancer. He's in the hospital. Weak, in pain. Not much time left. And a friend visits him. And they're talking. And Feynman mentions a physics problem he's been thinking about. His friend is shocked. You're dying. Why are you still working on physics problems? Oh, slow down, P. And Feynman says something beautiful. He says, I'm not working on it. I'm playing with it. I'm curious about it. I want to understand it. That's what I do. That's who I am. Let that land right up until the end. Still curious, still learning, still trying to understand. Not for grades, not for career, not for reputation, for understanding itself. And make the connection. That's what Feynman's method really is. It's not a trick to learn faster or appear smarter. It's a commitment to genuine understanding, a refusal to fake it, a willingness to go slow so you can go deep. And when you commit to that, when you stop trying to look fast and start trying to understand deeply, something shifts. You stop competing with others. You stop comparing your speed to their speed. You stop worrying about falling behind. Because you're playing a different game. They're optimizing for speed. You're optimizing for depth. Build the conclusion. They're sprinting. You're building. They're memorizing. You're understanding. They're racing. You're growing. And in the long run, in the game that actually matters, depth beats speed. Understanding beats memorization. Building beats racing. Slow becomes unstoppable. A for direct address. So here's my challenge to you. And I mean this, really do this. For the next 30 days, pick one concept each day, just one, and work through the method. Admit what you don't understand. Explain it simply. Break it to first principles. Test your understanding. One concept, 1 hour, 30 days. Has pauses on and watch what happens. Watch how different your understanding feels. Watch how much more capable you become. Watch how problems that used to stump you become solvable. Watch yourself go from fast and shallow to slow and unstoppable. Psych jet emotional being. Because here's what nobody tells you: you don't have to be the fastest. You don't have to be the first. You don't have to keep up with people who are sprinting ahead with surface knowledge. You just have to go deep, build solid, understand truly. Do that, and eventually, inevitably, you become unstoppable.
Wow.
Final pause. That's Feynman's method. That's how you go from slow to unstoppable, not by speeding up, but by going deeper, by refusing to pretend, by demanding real understanding, by building from foundations that can't be shaken. Walk to center. I started slow, I stayed slow, and I became unstoppable. You can too. Use the method. Trust the process. Go deep. Thank you. And if you want to dive deeper into Feynman's methods, if you want more techniques, more insights, more ways to build unstoppable understanding, do me a favor, like this video and subscribe to the Mind of Richard Feynman channel. We're exploring how one of history's greatest minds actually worked, with practical methods you can use starting today. Join us. Let's go from slow to unstoppable together. See you in the next one.
Action cures fear. If you wait to feel like it before you act, you're only strengthening procrastination. And the difference between those who achieve and those who stay stuck in the same place is this: acting at the exact moment the mind tries to delay. Now pay very close attention, because I'm about to reveal something few people ever tell you about procrastination. You may never have realized this. Procrastination isn't rest. It's the hidden source of your stress. You think you're easing the pressure when you postpone a task, but the opposite happens. Every minute that passes without doing what needs to be done, your mind keeps working in silence, like an alarm that never shuts off. That's why even without taking action, you feel drained, heavy, and anxious. The body rests, but the mind doesn't. And let me tell you something most people don't know. Putting off work, delaying a commitment, is actually more exhausting than doing it, because the weight of postponing is heavier than the effort of completing. When you decide to delay, your mind doesn't forget. It keeps reminding you over and over. When you try to relax, the thought pops up. When you try to sleep, your brain whispers, "You still haven't done it." It's like carrying a debt that never stops charging interest. But when you finally face the task and get it done, something powerful happens inside you. The weight lifts, your body relaxes, and your mind finds peace. It's as if the energy once drained by guilt is suddenly freed up to create, to dream, and to achieve more. Great achievers understood this in practice. Acting is easier than delaying. That's the real secret. The effort of doing is limited, but the reward is incredible. The effort of carrying the mental weight of not doing is endless.
And here lies the first key. Every time you catch yourself stalling, remember, you're choosing the harder path. It looks like comfort, but it's suffering in disguise. True freedom begins when you choose to act. Not because you're inspired, but because you've understood that action is the only way to reclaim the energy procrastination steals from you. So now the question is, are you going to keep hiding behind excuses? Or are you going to use this moment to flip the switch once and for all? If you're willing, stay with me until the end of this talk. I ask you for just 10 minutes. 10 minutes that could unlock your life and free you from the weight of procrastination forever. Believe me, very few lessons like the one you'll hear today are ever shared. Pay close attention now, because what I'm about to reveal is the first weapon to crush procrastination once and for all. Here's one of the secrets. Start before you're ready. The biggest mistake people make is believing they must wait for the perfect moment, the perfect motivation, the perfect energy to act. But that moment never comes. And the longer you wait, the further action slips away. The secret is to flip the logic. It's not motivation that creates action. It's action that creates motivation. And here's something that may change the way you think about action. A person with little knowledge but who decides to take a step forward is already miles ahead of someone with all the knowledge in the world who refuses to move. Those who know little but take action achieve more than those who know much yet remain still. Because it's not the size of what you know that defines your future. It's the size of the step you take. Stagnant knowledge is like still water. It evaporates with time. But action, even when imperfect, is like a flowing river. It carves a path, learns along the way, and grows stronger with every mile it moves forward. So here's an exercise that can transform your life. Whenever you feel that urge to delay, commit to just 2 minutes of the task. Just 2 minutes. Pick up the notebook and write the first line. Open your computer and organize the first file.
It doesn't matter what the task is, break the resistance with the smallest possible action. And something almost magical happens. Once you begin, even for 2 minutes, the energy shifts. The mind that resisted starts to cooperate. The body that felt heavy finds rhythm. And here is the second key: the power of simply beginning, even without knowing everything. Great achievers aren't different from you. They only learn this one secret: never wait to be ready. That's the greatest secret. They understand that perfection comes along the way, not at the beginning. And if you apply this, you'll realize that the act of starting is already half the victory. So, when procrastination tries to trap you again, remember, don't fight it by waiting for strength. Beat it by taking a step. Start small, but start now. Pay close attention now. Destroying procrastination is not a single act. It's a way of life. It's no use starting today only to fall into the same traps tomorrow. You need to build within yourself a system so simple and so strong that procrastination finds no space to grow. The secret is in turning small victories into daily discipline. Every time you act, no matter how small the action, you're training your mind to obey action instead of doubt. You begin to create a pattern. That pattern becomes character, and character shapes destiny. This is how great minds, scientists, inventors, and achievers went so far, not because they were perfect, but because they chose to act every single day. Procrastination isn't only about what you fail to do, but about the pattern you reinforce each day. Every time you delay, you're training your brain to delay again. But every time you act, even in something small, you're training your mind to act again. This is how habits are born, through small, invisible repetitions that, when added together, create an unbreakable force. Imagine this: a person who writes just 1 page a day. It seems small, almost nothing, but in a year they have 365 pages, a full book. Meanwhile, someone with big ideas plans to write 365 pages in a single week, but without discipline ends the year with nothing but blank pages. And here's the key: it is always habit that wins over talent. You don't need to change your entire life today. You only need to start small, but repeat it every single day. Read for 5 minutes. Exercise for 5 minutes. What matters is not the size of the step, but the consistency with which you take it. So engrave this in your mind. Don't wait for perfect conditions, and whenever you begin, begin small. Because today's discipline, no matter how small it seems, will become tomorrow's enormous legacy. Now pay very close attention, because we've reached the most important part. It's not enough to just start building good habits if you keep feeding the bad ones. It's like trying to fill a leaky bucket. No matter how much water you pour in, it all drains out through the holes. Procrastination, addictions, constant distractions. These are the holes that drain your energy, your discipline, and your life. Have you ever wondered why everything that feels like sin also feels so good? It's because almost everything that feels good pulls you into the pit. Everything that gives you immediate pleasure without discipline comes with a heavy price. The world offers sweet shortcuts that in the end lead straight into a hole. Overeating, drinking without control, the comfort of laziness, endless distractions. All of these seem to ease the moment, but they are quietly stealing your life. The drink that corrodes your health, the screen that robs your days. Immediate pleasure almost always hides a long-term prison. And here's the truth most people don't want to hear. If something gives you pleasure but weakens you, it isn't pleasure, it's poison.
It's like a fire that warms you for an instant, but then burns everything around you. The problem isn't pleasure itself, but being enslaved to it. When you live chasing what feels good and easy, you lose the strength to build what is great and lasting. Addictions always sell the illusion of freedom, but they always deliver chains. You think you're choosing, but in reality you're being chosen, dominated, controlled. And there's only one way to break free. Decide that no momentary pleasure will ever be greater than the extraordinary life you were meant to live. Discipline may taste bitter at first, but it's discipline that brings true pleasure. The pleasure of achieving, of feeling proud, of looking in the mirror and seeing someone free. Because the pleasure of sin lasts for a moment, but its weight can last for years. So next time temptation comes, remember, what feels good now may be the very thing digging your grave. But if you have the courage to say no to the immediate, you are saying yes to the future you've always dreamed of. And here's the key. The human brain is always searching for reward. If you only feed it cheap, easy rewards, it gets used to crumbs. But if you train your mind to wait for and pursue greater rewards, you teach your soul to choose greatness over mediocrity. Trading immediate pleasure for the satisfaction of achievement is an act of maturity. It's deciding that your life is worth more than a few seconds of relief. It's understanding that true pleasure isn't found in what you consume, but in what you build. And here's the decision you need to make. The next time temptation comes, ask yourself, do I want 5 minutes of pleasure or a lifetime of pride? The answer to that question defines your destiny. So start before you're ready. Take the first step, even if it's small. Replace immediate pleasure with the satisfaction of achievement. Feed good habits every day and cut out the ones that drag you down. And now the greatest secret of all. Without it, nothing is possible. Understand that you will make mistakes. You will fall, you will fail, you will procrastinate at times, and that's okay. To err is human. What separates failures from the successful is not the absence of mistakes, but the ability to rise and keep going. Persistence through habit. True power doesn't come from always getting it right, but from getting it wrong less and less. Success is born out of disciplined repetition, not perfection. The great achievers all made mistakes, stumbled, failed, but they never stopped. And that is exactly what you must do. Fall, learn, and continue. Because the only true defeat is giving up. So take this as a life decree. It's not about never failing. It's about never stopping. Those who persist win. Those who insist win. And those who decide to continue, even after the fall, find in habit the key to ending procrastination. And now I want you to do something simple yet powerful. Declare your decision for change. Comment below, I decide to overcome procrastination. Let this sentence be your mark that from today on, you are no longer a prisoner of inertia. And don't forget to leave a like if this video has helped you. It's very important for us. Subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video.
Not with this talk. I'm here. I'm doing it. But somewhere in my life right now, there's something I should be doing that I'm not doing. Maybe it's a project I've been putting off for weeks. Maybe it's a conversation I need to have. Maybe it's learning something I've been saying I'll learn when I have time. Stand up. And you know what? You are too. Right now, in this moment, there's something you know you should be doing. Something important. Something meaningful. Something that would move your life forward. And you're not doing it. Direct address aims, we're all the same. Every single person in this room, we know what we should be doing. We have goals. We have dreams. We have projects. We have ideas. And we don't start. We wait. We prepare. We plan. We research. We wait for the right time, the right mood, the right circumstances, the right feeling of inspiration. And while we wait, life passes, opportunities disappear, dreams fade. and we wonder why we never accomplish what we're capable of. Seek pause, shift ton, but Richard Feynman, he didn't have this problem. Not because he was more motivated, not because he had more willpower, not because he was naturally disciplined. He had a method, a specific technique he used to force himself to start. Every single time, no matter how he felt, no matter how difficult the task, no matter how much resistance he faced. And today I'm going to show you that exact method, not a motivational speech, not a pep talk, a concrete, practical technique that Feynman used thousands of times. The same technique that led to a Nobel Prize, revolutionary discoveries, decades of productive work, lean-ins, and here's what's powerful about this: it works in the next 5 minutes, not someday, not after you build a habit. Right now, you can use this technique to start the thing you've been avoiding. Let me show you how. Walk across stage. But first, let me tell you the story that reveals everything about Feynman's starting method, because this story changed how I think about procrastination forever. It's 1965. Feynman has just won the Nobel Prize, huge honor, peak of his career. And you'd think he'd be ecstatic, right? He's depressed. Yeah, let that shock land us seriously. Nobel Prize winner depressed. Why? Because he's stuck. He can't start anything. He sits at his desk. He looks at physics problems, and he feels nothing. No motivation, no excitement, no drive. The work that used to consume him, that used to make him lose track of time, now feels like drudgery. He knows he should be working. He knows he's capable, but he can't make himself start. Slow down or sound familiar. This is the thing nobody tells you about successful people. They struggle with starting too. The difference isn't that they never feel resistance. The difference is they have methods for overcoming it. So what did Feynman do? Sever share this carefully. He went to the Caltech cafeteria just to get out of his office. And he's sitting there eating lunch, watching students. And a student throws a plate in the air. The plate wobbles as it spins, and Feynman notices something. The wobble and the spin have a relationship. And he thinks, I wonder what that relationship is. Not, I should figure that out. Not, I need to work on that. Just, I wonder. The conjecture, and that wondering, that tiny spark of genuine curiosity, that's enough. He goes back to his office, and he starts working on it. Not because he has to, not because it's important, because he's curious. He works out the physics of the wobbling plate, just for fun, just because it's interesting. And from that, from following his curiosity about something pointless, comes his most important work on quantum electrodynamics, the work that actually wins him the Nobel Prize. Make the point, this is Feynman's secret for starting, and it's completely different from what anyone else teaches. Everyone else says, think about why it's important, visualize the outcome. Remember your goals, use discipline, use willpower, force yourself. Feynman said, find what's interesting about it, follow your curiosity, start with play. That's a hotter, direct statement. That's the method, that's how he forced himself to start every single time, not by forcing, by following curiosity. And I know that sounds too simple, too easy, like it couldn't possibly work on hard things, on things you don't find interesting, on actual work, but it does. And I'm going to prove it to you by breaking down exactly how this works and how you can use it today. Let me start with the most important insight, the thing Feynman understood that most people miss. Get philosophical. Starting is not about motivation. Starting is about attention. Think about it. When do you naturally start things without resistance? When something captures your attention. When something makes you curious. When something interests you. You don't need discipline to watch a show you're hooked on. You don't need willpower to talk about something that fascinates you. You don't need motivation to explore something that makes you curious. Make the contrast. But when something doesn't capture your attention, when it feels like obligation instead of interest, that's when you need massive discipline, massive willpower, massive motivation. And those resources are limited. They run out. That's why forcing yourself to start through sheer willpower doesn't work long term. High point, but attention. Attention is unlimited. When something genuinely interests you, you can pay attention to it for hours, days, weeks, without exhaustion. That's what Feynman figured out. The secret to starting isn't finding more willpower. It's finding the interesting angle, the curious question, the playful approach. Find that, and starting becomes effortless. Tell this story. Let me show you what this looked like in practice. Concrete example. Feynman needs to write a paper, a formal, technical physics paper, the kind of thing that's tedious to write, lots of equations, careful proofs, precise language. Most physicists would approach this with dread. I have to write this paper. It's going to take forever. Let me clear my schedule. Let me force myself to sit down and grind through it. Feynman doesn't do that. Instead, he asks himself, what's the most interesting part of this? What's the one thing I'm excited to explain? I could continue, maybe it's a clever insight. Maybe it's an unexpected connection. Maybe it's a simple way to understand something complex. He finds that interesting part, and he starts there, not with the introduction, not with the abstract, with the part that makes him curious. And once he's engaged, once his attention is captured, the rest follows. He writes the interesting part, then the part that connects to it, then the next part. Paspasis, the paper gets written, but not through force, through following his interest from one part to the next. To make it practical, this is the technique. This is how you use curiosity to start. Step 1, don't think about the whole task. That's overwhelming. That triggers resistance. Step 2, ask yourself, what's the most interesting part of this? What's the one piece I'm curious about? Step 3, start there. Just that one interesting piece, nothing else. Give yourself permission to ignore everything else. Explain why this works. Here's what happens once you start the interesting part. You build momentum. Your brain engages, your attention focuses, and suddenly the other parts don't seem as hard. But if you try to start with the hard parts, the boring parts, the parts that don't interest you, you never build momentum. You're fighting resistance the entire time. Give another example. Let's say you need to write a report. Boring. Tedious. You've been putting it off for days. Don't think about the whole report. Don't force yourself to start at the beginning. Ask, what's the most interesting data point in this report? What's the one finding I think is cool? Start by writing about that. Just that one thing. 2 paragraphs. That's it. I'm sex snap. You're not procrastinating anymore. You've started. And once you've written those 2 paragraphs, the next part is easier. And the next part is easier. And before you know it, the report is done. Not through force, through following interest. Share personal example. Let me tell you about when I discovered this technique. When it clicked for me. I had this huge project I'd been avoiding for months. Every time I thought about it, I felt overwhelmed. It was too big, too complex, too many moving parts. And I kept trying to force myself to start. Just sit down and do it. Stop being lazy. Use discipline. It never worked. I'd sit down, stare at my screen, and find a million other things to do. It continues. Then I learned about Feynman's method, and I tried it. I asked, what's the most interesting part of this project? If I could work on just one piece, what would be fun? And there was something. One small part that I thought was kind of cool. A design challenge, a creative problem. So I started there. Just that one piece. Gave myself permission to ignore everything else. Build this, and you know what? I got absorbed. I worked on it for 2 hours. Didn't feel like work. Felt like play. And the next day I thought, what's the next interesting part? And I found something. And I worked on that, and piece by piece, following interest from one part to the next, the entire project got done. Not through discipline, through curiosity. Make the point. That's when I realized procrastination isn't laziness. It's not lack of discipline. It's lack of engagement. When something genuinely engages your attention, you don't procrastinate. You just do it. The problem is we try to force ourselves to start things that don't engage us. And force doesn't work, at least not sustainably. But finding the engaging angle, that works every time. Address the obvious objection. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's great for interesting projects. But what about truly boring things? Things that have no interesting angle. Things I just have to do. A fair question. Let me show you how Feynman handled truly boring tasks. Tell this story. Feynman has to attend committee meetings, university bureaucracy, budget discussions, policy decisions, the most boring, tedious, pointless feeling meetings you can imagine. He hates them. Everyone hates them. Most professors just suffer through, counting the minutes until they can leave. Feynman does something different. He plays a game with himself. Our founder explained, he asks, can I predict what people will say before they say it? Can I figure out the hidden agendas? Can I understand the group dynamics? He turns the boring meeting into a psychology experiment. He's not enduring it. He's studying it. He's curious about it. Herr Pause, is this artificially creating interest? Yes, absolutely. But who cares it works? He's engaged. He's paying attention. The meeting isn't torture anymore. It's interesting. 8. Make it actionable. This is the advanced technique. When something truly has no inherent interest, you create interest. You turn it into a game. You set a challenge. You find a puzzle to solve. Boring paperwork. Can you do it in half the usual time? Can you find a way to systematize it so you never have to think about it again? Tedious data entry. Can you find patterns? Can you predict what comes next? Can you figure out why the system is designed this way? You're not changing the task. You're changing your relationship to it. You're finding a way to engage your curiosity, even artificially. And once curiosity is engaged, starting becomes easy. Facts are tell another Feynman story. Here's another example of this technique in action, and this one is brilliant. Feynman needs to learn biology, not his field. He's a physicist, but he's curious about how life works at the molecular level. So he starts attending biology lectures. And at first, it's interesting. Everything's new, everything's exciting, but then it gets tedious. There's a lot of memorization, a lot of terminology, a lot of catalog knowledge. The kind of stuff that's boring to learn. Share what he does. Most people would force themselves through this. I have to memorize these terms. I have to power through. Let me make flashcards. Feynman asks, what's the underlying logic here? Why are these proteins shaped this way? What would happen if they were shaped differently? He turns memorization into problem solving. He's not just learning facts. He's figuring out systems. He's understanding principles. Make the connection, and that's inherently more interesting. Problem solving engages your brain in a way memorization doesn't. So even when the material itself is tedious, he finds a way to make his engagement with it interesting. Pause. That's the key insight. You can always find an interesting angle. Always. Even on the most boring tasks. Even on the most tedious material. It might not be the obvious angle. It might not be the standard approach. But there's always something that can capture your curiosity. Racha, get practical. Let me give you a framework. A concrete process you can use right now to find the interesting angle on anything. When you're stuck, when you can't make yourself start, when you're procrastinating, use these 5 questions. Sutarsta present these clearly. Question 1. What about this would a 10-year-old find interesting? Kids are naturally curious. They find interest in things adults think are boring. Channel that perspective. What would make a kid go cool? Question 2. What's the puzzle here? What's the thing I could figure out? Our brains love puzzles. They love problems to solve. Even in boring tasks, there's usually a puzzle. Find it. Sarah, continue. Question 3. What could I learn from this that would be useful elsewhere? If the task itself isn't interesting, maybe the skills or knowledge you gain from it are. Find that angle. Question 4. How could I do this in a way nobody else has tried? Novelty is inherently interesting. Can you approach this task differently? Can you find a unique angle? Question 5. What would make this playful instead of work? How could you turn this into a game, a challenge, an experiment? What would make it fun? Pause. One of those 5 questions will give you an angle, an entry point, a way to engage your curiosity. And once curiosity is engaged, starting becomes automatic. Share a powerful example. Let me show you how powerful this is with a specific example. You need to clean your house. Boring. Tedious? You've been putting it off. You try to force yourself. Doesn't work. Use the questions. What would a 10-year-old find interesting? Maybe the satisfaction of making things perfect. The transformation. What's the puzzle? Maybe figuring out the most efficient order to clean things. The optimal path through the house. What could I learn? Maybe time management. Maybe systems thinking. Maybe just what state I let things get to before I finally clean. Continue. How could I do this differently? Maybe I clean to music and try to dance while cleaning. Maybe I pretend I'm a professional cleaner and time myself. Maybe I take before and after photos. What would make it playful? Maybe I set a timer and race it. Maybe I make it a game to throw things away. Maybe I treat it like a meditation. Point of C. 5 angles. At least one of them makes cleaning slightly more interesting than it was before. And that's enough. That's all you need to start. Get serious now. Here's what's crucial to understand. This technique isn't about tricking yourself. It's not about pretending boring things are interesting. It's about recognizing that interest is a choice. Attention is a choice. Leifer explained this carefully. You can choose what you pay attention to about any task. You can focus on how tedious it is, how much you don't want to do it, how boring it feels. That's one choice. Or you can focus on finding the one interesting angle, the one engaging element, the one curious question. That's another choice. Rack make the point. Most people don't realize they have this choice. They think interest just happens to them. Either something is interesting or it's not. Feynman understood you can cultivate interest. You can direct your curiosity. You can choose what engages you. And that choice is the difference between effortless starting and constant procrastination. Bart, tell one more story. Let me give you one final Feynman example. This one shows the technique at its purest. Feynman is asked to serve on a committee investigating science education, specifically evaluating textbooks. Boring, tedious. Most professors would decline or suffer through it. Feynman sees an interesting angle. He asks, how bad are these textbooks really? Can I find the worst example of teaching without understanding? Build this on. Now it's not a boring obligation. It's a challenge, a treasure hunt. He's looking for the worst textbook, the most egregious example of empty jargon, and he finds it. Books that use scientific terms without explaining concepts. That makes students feel like they understand when they don't. He's engaged. He's curious. He writes scathing reviews. Not because he has to, because he's genuinely interested in exposing bad education. Pause the same task, different angle. One approach is torture, the other is engaging. The task didn't change. His relationship to it did. I can walk to center stage. So let me bring this all together. Let me give you the complete method. Feynman's technique for forcing himself to start every single time. Present this as a complete system. When you're stuck, when you're procrastinating, when you can't make yourself start. Here's what you do first. Stop trying to force yourself. Stop using discipline and willpower and guilt. Those don't work. They just make you feel worse. Second, ask yourself, what's the most interesting part of this task? What's the one piece I'm curious about? Third, if nothing seems interesting, use the 5 questions. Find an angle that engages you. Create interest if you have to. Pray, continue. Fourth, give yourself permission to start with just that interesting part. Nothing else. You don't have to do the whole thing. Just the one engaging piece. Fifth, start. Just start. On that one piece, for 5 minutes, that's at 6, notice what happens. Once you start, momentum builds. Your brain engages. The next piece becomes easier. A pause, that's the method. That's how Feynman did it. Thousands of times, over decades. Not through superhuman discipline. Through understanding how attention works. Through following curiosity instead of forcing compliance. If I get personal, I use this technique every single day now. Every time I catch myself procrastinating, I ask, what's interesting about this? What angle could engage me? And every time I find something, every time it makes starting easier. I share results. I've written more, accomplished more, learned more. Not because I became more disciplined, but because I stopped trying to force myself and started following my curiosity or pointed audience. And you can do this too? Right now. Think about that thing you've been procrastinating on. That thing you thought about when I mentioned procrastination at the start of this talk. You know what it is. It's sitting there in your mind. That project, that conversation, that task. How's that direct challenge edge? Ask yourself right now, what's the most interesting part of it? What's the one piece that makes you even slightly curious? Got it. Good. That's where you start. Not with the whole thing, not with the hard parts, not with the beginning, with that one interesting piece. Today, in the next hour, 5 minutes, that's all. Egg pauses and watch what happens. Watch how different it feels to start from curiosity instead of obligation. Watch how momentum builds. Watch how the rest becomes easier. A fast build to conclusion. This is what Feynman taught us. Not just about physics, about life, about getting things done, about being productive. Success isn't about discipline, it's about engagement. It's about finding what's interesting and following it. It's about turning work into play, obligation into curiosity. Slow down, and when you do that, when you stop forcing and start following, everything changes. Starting isn't hard anymore. It's natural. It's automatic. It's even enjoyable. You're not pushing yourself. You're pulled by your interest. You're drawn by your curiosity. You're engaged by what you find fascinating. Final point. That's how Feynman forced himself to start. Every single time. Not by forcing at all. By finding what was interesting and following it. And that's how you can start too. Not someday. Not when you feel more motivated right now. Today. This afternoon. Find the interesting angle. Start there. Follow your curiosity. Pause, smile us. It's that simple. It's that powerful. It's that transformative. Thank you. First be if you want more techniques from Feynman, more insights into how one of history's most productive minds actually worked. Do me a favor, like this video and subscribe to the Mind of Richard Feynman channel. We're uncovering the real methods behind Feynman's genius. Not motivation, not discipline, actual techniques you can use. Join us. Let's start together. See you in the next one. I'm going to teach you a language right now. In the next 5 minutes, not fluently, obviously. But I'm going to show you something that most language teachers never tell you. Something that Richard Feynman understood. Something that separates people who actually learn languages from people who spend years studying and can barely order a coffee. A pause. Put down the book. Here's what's crazy: you already speak a language. You already know how language works. You acquired your first language without memorizing a single grammar rule, without flashcards, without apps, without trying. You were a baby. You listened, you played, you communicated, and one day you spoke leniency. So why, when we try to learn a second language as adults, do we abandon that natural process? Why do we memorize vocabulary lists? Why do we drill grammar rules? Why do we treat language learning like we're memorizing the periodic table? Because that's how schools teach it. And it's completely wrong. Fact, direct statement. Richard Feynman learned multiple languages. Not perfectly, but functionally. Enough to give lectures in Portuguese. Enough to read scientific papers in German and Russian. Enough to communicate with colleagues around the world. And he never memorized vocabulary lists. Never drilled verb conjugations. Never used flashcards. He had a method. A method based on how the brain actually acquires language. The same method that made him a genius at physics. The same method that let him understand anything deeply and quickly. And today, I'm going to teach you that method. Because once you understand it, you'll realize you've been learning languages wrong your entire life. See, walk across stage. Let me start with a story that reveals everything. It's 1951. Feynman accepts a visiting professorship in Brazil. At the Center for Physical Research in Rio de Janeiro, he's going to teach physics to graduate students. There's just one problem: he doesn't speak Portuguese. Most people would panic. They'd buy a Portuguese course. They'd hire a tutor. They'd spend months before going, memorizing vocabulary and grammar rules. We share what Feynman does. Feynman does something different. He gets on a ship to Brazil. This is before easy flights. And on the ship, he has about 2 weeks. He doesn't study Portuguese grammar. He doesn't memorize vocabulary lists. Instead, he finds Portuguese speakers on the ship, and he just talks to them or tries to. He gestures. He uses cognates. He makes mistakes. He plays with the language. 2 weeks. No formal study. Just immersion and play. It will reveal the result. He arrives in Brazil, and within a month he's giving physics lectures in Portuguese. Not perfect Portuguese. Not literary Portuguese, but functional, communicative Portuguese. His colleagues are shocked. How did you learn so fast? And Feynman says something that reveals his entire method. I didn't learn Portuguese. I acquired it. There's a difference. Opposite of that difference. Between learning and acquiring. That's the secret. That's what separates geniuses from people who study for years and learn nothing. Let me explain what this means. If I could explain this carefully, when you learn a language the traditional way, you're using your conscious mind. You're memorizing rules. You're studying grammar. You're translating in your head. English to French. French to English. Always thinking about the language. But when you acquire a language, you're using the same part of your brain that learned your first language. The language acquisition device. The part that doesn't memorize, it absorbs. It patterns, it internalizes. Hey, make the contrast. Learning is conscious and slow. Acquiring is unconscious and fast. Learning requires effort and feels like work. Acquiring feels natural and happens automatically. Learning gives you knowledge about the language. Acquiring gives you the ability to use the language. Pack point, and here's the key insight that Feynman understood. The brain can't learn language through memorization. It can only acquire it through comprehensible input and meaningful use. You can memorize 1,000 vocabulary words, But if you've never heard those words in context, never used them in communication, never encountered them in meaningful situations, you don't really know them. They're just isolated facts in your head. Tell another story. Let me show you what this looks like. Concrete example. Feynman wants to read German physics papers, important papers, cutting-edge research, but they're in German, and he doesn't speak German. Most physicists would either avoid the papers or rely on translations. Some might take a German class, traditional approach. Grammar first, vocabulary lists, gradual progression. Share Feynman's approach. Feynman just starts reading the papers, in German, even though he doesn't know German. But wait, you're thinking, how can you read something in a language you don't know? Here's how he uses context. He uses cognates, words that are similar in English and German. He uses the math and equations as anchors. He guesses meaning from structure. He tolerates ambiguity. The first paper takes him 8 hours. He understands maybe 30%. But he keeps going. The second paper takes 6 hours, 40% comprehension. Third paper, 4 hours, 50%. He's not memorizing vocabulary. He's acquiring it by seeing words in context, by figuring out meaning from usage, by building intuition about how German works. Ask or reveal the result. After 3 months, he's reading German physics papers at near native speed. He never took a formal class, never memorized conjugation tables, never drilled vocabulary. He just jumped in, used comprehensible input, let his brain do what it's designed to do, acquire language through meaningful exposure. Make the point. That's the method. That's how geniuses learn languages without memorizing. They don't study the language, they use it. They immerse themselves in comprehensible input. They tolerate ambiguity. They let their brain acquire naturally instead of forcing it to memorize artificially. Cass addressed the skepticism. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's Feynman. He was a genius. His brain works differently. I can't do that. Wrong. Your brain works the same way. Every human brain has the same language acquisition capacity. You proved it when you learned your first language. You didn't memorize grammar rules as a baby. You acquired language naturally through exposure and use. Kier explained, the reason adults struggle with language learning isn't because their brains changed. It's because they're using the wrong method. They're trying to consciously learn something that can only be unconsciously acquired. Let me show you exactly how to apply Feynman's method, the specific techniques he used that you can use starting today. As present technique, Technique 1, comprehensible input. This is the foundation of everything. Comprehensible input means content in your target language that you can mostly understand. But that's slightly above your current level. Not completely easy. Not impossibly hard. Just right at the edge of your ability. I will explain why this works. When you expose yourself to comprehensible input, your brain automatically starts noticing patterns. It starts connecting words to meanings. It starts internalizing grammar without you consciously studying it. But the input has to be comprehensible. If it's too hard, if you understand less than 50%, you're just hearing noise. Your brain can't extract patterns from noise. If it's too easy, if you understand everything perfectly, you're not growing. There's no new language to acquire. Can make it practically. So how do you find comprehensible input? For beginners, children's books, children's shows, simple conversations, content designed for learners. Anything with pictures or context clues that help you understand. For intermediate learners, young adult books, casual YouTube videos, podcasts on familiar topics, content where you can guess unknown words from context. For advanced learners, native content on subjects you already know, news about topics you follow, books in genres you've read in English. The Share Feynman example. This is why Feynman started with physics papers in German. He already understood the physics. So even when the German was challenging, he had context. The equations were the same. The concepts were familiar. That made the German comprehensible. He didn't start with German poetry. That would have been incomprehensible. He started where he had maximum context to make the language understandable. Far present, technique 2. Technique 2, active contextualization. This is different from memorization. When you encounter a new word, don't memorize its translation. Connect it to its context. Build a mental image. Associate it with the situation. Or give example. Let's say you're reading a Portuguese story and you encounter the word cachorro, and from context you figure out it means dog. The memorization approach. Takoro equals dog. Kakoro equals dog, repeat 50 times, put it in a flashcard, drill it. The acquisition approach visualize the scene. There's a Kokoro in the story. See it, hear it barking. Notice what the Kokoro is doing. Feel the word in the context of the story. Explain the difference. When you contextualize, you're not memorizing a translation. You're building a direct connection between the word and its meaning. No translation layer. Just like in your native language, you don't translate dog into a concept. The word asks the concept. That's what acquisition does. It builds direct connections. That's why it's faster and more permanent than memorization. Present technique 3, productive struggle. This is crucial and counterintuitive. Most language courses try to make learning easy. They break everything down into tiny steps. They don't let you struggle. They don't let you make mistakes. Get direct D. But struggle is where acquisition happens. When you're trying to communicate and you don't know the word. When you're reading and you have to guess meaning. When you're listening and you have to infer from context. That struggle, that cognitive effort, that's what makes the language stick. Share Feynman example. When Feynman was giving lectures in Portuguese, he made mistakes constantly. He used wrong words. He messed up grammar. Sometimes he had to gesture or draw pictures to communicate. His students could have helped him more, could have corrected every error, could have made it easier for him. But he didn't want that. He wanted to struggle because he understood the struggle is the acquisition process. Make it practical, so when you're learning a language, don't avoid struggle. Embrace it. Try to speak before you're ready. Try to read things slightly too hard for you. Try to watch shows without subtitles. Try to communicate even when you don't know all the words. That discomfort, that's learning. That's your brain building new neural pathways. That's acquisition happening. Present technique 4, technique 4, pattern recognition over rule memorization. This is huge. This is what separates Feynman's approach from traditional language learning. Traditional approach, learn grammar rules. Study conjugation tables. Memorize when to use subjunctive. Understand syntax structures. Feynman's approach, notice patterns. Let grammar emerge naturally. Trust your brain to internalize structure through exposure. Explain. Here's what happens. When you expose yourself to enough comprehensible input, your brain automatically notices patterns. You start to feel what sounds right and what sounds wrong, not because you know the rule, but because you've internalized the pattern. This is how you learned your first language. You never studied grammar as a child, but you can feel when a sentence is grammatically correct in your native language. That feeling is pattern recognition. Give example, in English, we say, I want to go, not I want go. Why? Because there's a rule about infinitives requiring to in certain contexts. But you didn't learn that rule. You just heard want to together so many times that it sounds right. And want go sounds wrong, even though you might not know why. Make the application. That's what you want to build in your target language. Not knowledge of rules, but intuition about patterns. And the way you build that intuition is exposure. Massive amounts of comprehensible input. Your brain will do the pattern recognition automatically. You don't have to consciously study the patterns. As in present technique 5, meaningful communication over rote practice. This is the final piece, and it's what makes the difference between studying a language for years and never speaking it versus acquiring it quickly and using it confidently. Explain, rote practice is drilling, repeating phrases, doing grammar exercises. Fill in the blank worksheets. All the stuff traditional language classes make you do. Meaningful communication is using language to actually communicate something you care about. Having real conversations. Reading things you're genuinely interested in. Writing about topics that matter to you. Make the contrast. Rote practice might help you pass a test, but it doesn't lead to acquisition because your brain doesn't care about meaningless practice. It doesn't encode information that isn't meaningful. But meaningful communication, your brain prioritizes that because communication matters. It's what language is for. Share example. When Feynman was learning Portuguese, he wasn't doing practice drills. He was talking to people about physics, about ideas, about things he cared about. That communication was meaningful. So his brain prioritized acquiring the language needed for that communication. If he'd been drilling verb conjugations, his brain would have treated it as meaningless, busy work. minimal acquisition. Make it actionable. So how do you implement this? Don't do generic practice exercises. Find ways to communicate meaningfully in your target language. Write a blog in your target language about something you're interested in. Find language exchange partners and talk about topics you care about. Read books in the language that you'd want to read anyway. Pause. Bring it together, Heath. So those are the 5 techniques: comprehensible input, active contextualization, productive struggle, pattern recognition, meaningful communication. Together, they create a method that leverages how your brain naturally acquires language, instead of fighting against it with memorization and rules. I address common concern now. Some of you are thinking, this sounds harder than just memorizing vocabulary and grammar rules. Isn't that more efficient? No, and here's why. Explain the mathies. Let's say you spend 6 months memorizing vocabulary and grammar. You learn 2,000 words. You know all the tenses. You've studied hard. But when you try to have a conversation, you can't. You're translating in your head. You're thinking about rules. You can't understand native speakers. You can't express yourself naturally. At contrast, now let's say you spend 6 months immersing in comprehensible input, reading, listening, trying to communicate, making mistakes, struggling. You might not consciously know 2,000 words. You might not be able to recite grammar rules, but you can have conversations. You can understand movies. You can read books. You can think in the language. Make the point, which method actually achieved the goal? Which method gave you functional language ability? Memorization gives you knowledge about the language. Acquisition gives you the language. Better from share personal story. Let me tell you about my own experience with this. I spent 4 years studying Spanish in school. Traditional method, vocabulary quizzes, grammar tests, conjugation drills. I got good grades. And after 4 years, I could barely order food in a Mexican restaurant. 4 years of study, almost zero functional ability. Continue. Then I discovered Feynman's method. And I started over with French, but completely differently. No grammar books, no vocabulary lists. I just started reading simple books, watching children's shows, trying to speak with native speakers online, accepting that I'd make mistakes, tolerating ambiguity. Share results of 6 months later. I was having hour-long conversations in French, reading novels, watching movies without subtitles. Not perfectly, but functionally. 6 months of acquisition beat 4 years of memorization. Pause. That's when I understood. The method matters more than the effort. You can study wrong for years and get nowhere. Or you can acquire right for months and achieve fluency. Get practical. So let me give you a concrete plan. Exactly how to use Feynman's methods starting today. Thus I present the plan. Week 1, find comprehensible input. For complete beginners, that means learner content, podcasts for learners, graded readers, YouTube channels for language learners. Content designed to be comprehensible at your level. Week 2, consume that input daily. 1 hour a day minimum. Read or listen. Don't try to memorize. Don't translate every word. Just try to understand the general meaning. Get comfortable with ambiguity. Week 3, start trying to produce. Write simple sentences. Record yourself speaking. Find a language exchange partner. Start using the language even badly. The productive struggle begins. Continue month 2. Increase input. Start consuming native content on familiar topics. If you love cooking, watch cooking shows in your target language. If you follow sports, read sports news. Use your existing knowledge to make the language comprehensible. Month 3, focus on meaningful communication. Join online communities in your target language. Comment on forums. Have conversations about topics you care about. Use language meaningfully, not just as practice. Month 6, immerse as much as possible. Change your phone language. Read books you'd read in English. Watch shows you'd watch anyway. Let the language become part of your daily life. I make the promise. Follow this plan for 6 months. Not perfectly. You'll miss days. You'll struggle. You'll want to quit. But if you stick with it, if you trust the acquisition process, instead of falling back to memorization, you'll be functionally fluent. You'll be able to communicate. You'll understand most of what you hear. You'll be able to read and enjoy native content. Hence, compare that to traditional methods, where after 6 months you've memorized vocabulary lists but can't have a conversation. Where after 2 years you still panic when someone speaks to you in the language. Address the fear. I know this method feels scary. It feels inefficient. It feels like you should be studying more formally, like you should have a textbook, like you should be memorizing. That's because our education system taught us that learning requires formal study. Memorization, tests, structure. But language isn't like other subjects. Language is a skill that your brain acquires naturally through exposure and use. Treating it like a subject to study is like trying to learn swimming by reading about it instead of getting in the water. Or make the analogy, you wouldn't memorize swimming terminology and expect to swim. You get in the pool, you struggle, you splash around. You gradually get better through doing it. That's what language acquisition is. You get in the linguistic pool, you struggle, you make mistakes. You gradually get better through using it. Quite share Feynman wisdom. Feynman understood this about all learning, not just languages. He said, if you want to understand something, use it, play with it, engage with it directly. Don't just study about it. That applies perfectly to language. Don't study about the language. Use it, play with it, engage with it directly. Tell final story. Let me end with one more Feynman story that encapsulates the entire method. A colleague asks Feynman, how did you learn to speak Portuguese so quickly? And Feynman says, I didn't learn to speak Portuguese. I learned to think in Portuguese. There's a difference. Explain. When you memorize and translate, you're still thinking in English. You think of what you want to say in English. You translate it to Portuguese. You speak. It's slow. It's conscious. It's exhausting. But when you acquire a language, you start thinking in it. You don't translate, you just speak. The thoughts arise in the target language. It's fast. It's unconscious. It's natural. Make the point, that's the goal. Not to know the language intellectually, but to think in it, to use it automatically, to have it become part of how your brain operates. And you can only get there through acquisition, not memorization. Hey, walk to center stage. So here's what I want you to understand. Really understand. You can learn a language, you have the capacity. Every human brain does. But you have to use the right method, the method that works with your brain's natural language acquisition system, not against it. Recap the method. Stop memorizing vocabulary lists. Start consuming comprehensible input. Stop drilling grammar rules. Start noticing patterns through exposure. Stop avoiding mistakes. Start struggling productively. Stop doing rote practice. Start communicating meaningfully. Stop translating in your head. Start thinking in the language. A final challenge, pick a language. Any language you've wanted to learn, or one you've been studying unsuccessfully, and try Feynman's method for 3 months, just 3 months. Find comprehensible input, 1 hour a day, consume it. Don't memorize, don't translate, just try to understand. Then try to use it even badly. Make the promise 3 months from now, you'll understand more of that language than you did from years of traditional study. Not because you're smarter, not because the method is magic, but because you're finally working with your brain's natural language acquisition system instead of fighting against it. That's how geniuses learn languages without memorizing. They don't. They acquire naturally, the way your brain is designed to. Czar Smileless, and now you can too. Thank you. And if you want more insights into how Feynman learned anything quickly, not just languages, but physics, mathematics, biology, art, anything, do me a favor, like this video and subscribe to the Mind of Richard Feynman channel. We're uncovering the real learning methods behind genius, not study hacks, not shortcuts, actual cognitive science applied practically. Join us. Let's learn like Feynman learned. See you in the next one.